How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, as I was viewing social media, question came our way. There it is. What does your administrative and command level leadership care more about? The safety and well-being of inmates or the safety and well-being of you and your fellow officers? On the surface, everybody's going to be quick to jump towards one side as that quick us versus admin and all this other stuff, but I find that question as a person at admin to be unfair and actually quite biased. I'm trying to push everybody away from the blame game. I'm trying to develop better working relationships between frontline and management, and I believe that question to be very divisive, and I'll explain why momentarily. I have my guest today is going to be Joel Pomponio, and we're going to discuss why this is probably the wrong question to be asking, because either way, it leads to division. And I actually have some notes later as we go through the show that I want to make sure we cover so you can get this perspective. And I think it's going to be fair, at least for admin, to speak on their perspective. I think to pose this question into a social media platform, it really just starts a division. And I don't think it does what's best for the corrections profession. It just continues to either push blame or just continues dividing us. Now, guys, if you get a chance, please check out these books, Inmate Manipulation Decoded. That book is available on Amazon. This book is used for training all across the country. So thank you guys for the continued support. And again, you guys want to get this book, the link to that is in the description. We also have How to Succeed in Corrections, Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison. This book is available through Blue 360 Media. I have the link to that in the description, guys. This book got tons of tips and advice. It partners very well with this book right here. I'm trying to kind of see if I'll never get a catch-all, but try to get as much information as I can out there. And then we also have, this book is coming out within a month, but it's available for pre-order right now. That book will also partner very well with the books I mentioned. This book is called Tips for New Corrections Officers and Their Supervisors. Again, it's more tips, smaller book, but it's definitely got a lot more tips that we can add to start building our collection on just the advice that we need to keep moving forward and being successful. All right, let me get Joe on. What up, Joe?
Hey, what's happening, brother?
Good to have you, Joe. I know this is kind of last minute, but I just, felt the urge to speak on this, and I didn't think me sharing it and giving my thoughts on Facebook was enough. I wanted to devote a video to it, so thank you for taking your time at the last minute to come on the show. Hey, Joe, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. My name is Joe Pomponio. I am a retired lieutenant from Texas Department of Criminal Justice of 30 years. Currently working in the general division of our local sheriff's department and a panel member for Tier Talk.
Yes, and we love having you. Hey, guys, just so you know, me, Joe, and Russ worked on a very quick article. They were able to contribute a couple of quotes to it on professional predictability. And I think it's going to hold very well when it comes to battling inmates that misuse policies and procedure, especially in this case, this day and age. One of our big concerns is the misuse of PREA, the weaponizing of PREA. So that article hopefully will get released soon. But I did, for the meantime, if you guys follow us on social media, check out my personal Facebook page or the Tier Talk Facebook page, and you'll see the article. All right, Joe, so let me go back to this question real quick. What does your administrative and command level leadership care more about? The safety and well-being of inmates or the safety and well-being of you and your fellow officers? So right off the bat, I'm trying to push us away from the blame culture, right? And I'm trying to build a better unity. So I can't allow this question to exist because I still feel that the question is very divisive in its answers. Now, don't get me wrong. There's some people like, nah, I think, it's staff first, and some like, no, it's inmates first. I think the question is wrong. I think the word more is kind of saying that if I care about one thing this way, then I care about the other thing less. And I don't think that works for administration. I think administration, has to be able to be seen as objective. I mean, think about as administration, if I had the families of the inmates that also have a level of expectation on us, including our higher levels, and they say, they would ask that question, how would I be able to answer that? Would I be able to say, yeah, we care about staff more? That's going to get twisted. That's going to get turned around, and they're going to say, well, that person can't be trusted in that position. They're biased. So I don't think the word more is the proper word. I think that feels that if I care for one thing more, that means obviously it's less than another area. I think the word more needs to shift to priority. And in that case then I can defend why I lean on staff a little bit more. So for me, I think the better question is, where's your priority? Is your priority towards staff or towards inmates? And I'm always going to say that my priority is towards staff, because if you give staff what they need to be effective, to be productive, the inmates will directly benefit from that. It doesn't go the other way. It doesn't go where inmates are the priority and staff are secondary. It won't work that way, because staff are the ones that have to implement whatever it is that you're pushing. So I believe I could safely say that it's not about more or less. It's about where does the priority go? Well, just like any job, even a business, I'm not equating it, but just an example of how leadership works. You take care of your people so they can then do what they need to do to be more effective. So just like any other business, if I want to keep my staff committed, if I want to have them engaged, if I want them to feel valued so they could go above and beyond in their duties, which is what corrections expects all the time. It is what it is, guys. It's that type of business. Then yes, my staff will be a priority, because that's going to translate into a direct benefit for the inmate population. And one example is this. Most of the time when staff ask me a question, it is literally so they can better manage the inmate population. Gangi, can I get access to the clothes that they need, because we have a lot of inmates coming in from intake and I just can't get them clothes? Not a problem. Let me see what I could do to make your day easier. So yes, that is my priority, but look who directly gets the benefit of that. The inmates who are going to need the clothes when they come in through intake. I mean, that was just a scenario, but as you can see, the benefit or the priority you give towards staff is always going to be in an effort to make them more productive and effective. So, Joe, let's talk about this first. The word more versus the word priority. Do you think that was a fair question to ask on social media?
I think the question itself was intended to get a general consensus of what people care about more as a whole. You know, to me, reading the question sounded like a loaded ultimatum question at the end of a bad argument. Kind of a comparison is, you know, having an argument with your wife, and your wife says, well, do you care more about work or do you care more about me? You know, again, it's a loaded question, because, you know, I have to care about work in order to be able to take care of you and the family. And, you know, it's kind of a loaded thing. You know, that question in itself is kind of loaded. It's not an either or, to me. Because of the fact, you know, and let me make it clear that, you know, we are all responsible for everybody's health and welfare, both officers and the offender population. So it's not a either or, but when it comes to the safety, then yes, I'm definitely going to put my staff first as a priority for, you know, over staff safety. But, you know, to ask that question, yeah, and I agree with you 100%. It sounds like the type of question that would cause an instant divide in the staff, both at the front line and command level, because, you know, that kind of question there starts the blame game. You know, well, he cares more about this. Well, she cares more about this. And you know, it's not, I don't think, in my mind, I think they were trying to get a general feel, but I just think the wording of the question was incorrect.
Yeah, but think about what you said too, which was perfect, is, you know, do I care about my safety of staff? Maybe of course we do, because they're the ones that need to be there, obviously, to be effective. You know, if we don't care about the safety of our staff, then how do we expect them to be effective when it deals with the safety of the inmate population? Now, I'm not coming out cold, of course, on a personal level. I care for the people I work for and I work with. Of course I do, 100%. But on a professional level, on the administrative level, my efforts of care, it's really rather what I prioritize in order to be the most effective for the agency. So my staff is prioritized. I want them to feel valued. I want them to feel engaged. I want them to be committed. But granted, all that effort is also for them to be productive, to create a working environment where we're successful. And a big part of that is the relationship with the inmate population. So to say that one has to be chosen over the other, I think the either or question becomes very limited. And as I said, when you move up and you have to be seen in that objective position, to be able to say that one life supersedes another, especially as that translates to the outside world, it doesn't carry out well, especially if you're trusted to make decisions where people will say, well, nah, are you kidding me? That person clearly stated all he does is care about staff. So granted, when decisions have to be made, they're not going to feel that the decisions are being made and where the best interest of the inmates lie. But here's the funny thing. If you prioritize staff and give them what they need, the best interest for the inmates is right there. It's
Absolutely.
not so right. This is not an either or. This is actually the foundation for a better environment. So having said that, treating staff as a priority definitely leads to a better working environment in so many different ways. But if we keep the argument is, well, do you care for staff more than you care for the inmates, or do you care for inmates more than you care for staff? You're making it look like the functions don't relate. And I disagree with that, because when you start moving up and you start managing the house as a whole, you're talking about many different departments, even just outside of custody, that all have a role in what has to be done. And to sit there and say that you have to care for more one side more than the other, it's not about that. It's about the priority functions in order to keep the facility effective. Because, to be honest with you, even though we're looking at this at a very generalized fashion, so we're saying the care of staff versus the care of the inmates, or vice versa, you can have that played out on a very individualized level. When you got someone doing something foolish, you're like, well, I guess you care for the inmates more than you care for me. It's like, well, wait a second. No, my job is to do what's correct. And be honest with you, even though a lot of people look at what's being correct as being subjective, if you know what the agency expects of you, it's not as subjective as people may think. It's just subjective if you don't get the outcome that you want. That's why I always tell people right now, in an effort to move away from the blame game, we have to start looking at effort over outcome. I think that's why this dialogue or these questions become asked or lead to being something so divisive, because I think there right now in corrections, we need more transparency. I'm not going to lie. We need more transparency as to why things are being done. I think if you let people know why, they would understand, and then we could kind of really work on a good how to really, keep things moving in the right direction, where everybody feels that they are heard and that they are valued. And then you get commitment from both sides, commitment from staff, and then also even commitment from the inmates, because ultimately the stuff that's being implemented is for their need. It is to meet their needs. But I think that we have a culture that really just, it's not about efforts. It's really about the outcome and what can be produced. And when that outcome isn't produced, sometimes staff may say, you know what, this is bullshit. We should have got, it's like, yeah, but wait a second. You just negated the effort that was put into it. I don't have control of the outcome. I have only control of the effort. So what I think to do is to alleviate all this is to provide some transparency in the effort. Because if you notice something, Joe, when I saw the comments, and there were some people like, yeah, admin cares only about inmates, and there was a good portion of it. And then there were some that were like, admin cares about staff first, and there were some defending that. I think if you look at the reason why the answers may go on the extreme of each end is because there are some that may understand the role of admin a bit more, than those who may just rely on admin to provide outcomes that are actually out of their control. I mean, am I simplifying it? I'm sure there's many reasons why. And it could be personal interactions that I have with an administrator that cares. And maybe I realize maybe that's what they are supposed to be doing. So I don't generalize the negative. I look to generalize the positive. But this really goes all the way down to the blame game. I mean, it really is the blame game. Hey, I asked for this. We couldn't get this. And that's because admin just strictly cares about the inmates. And you got the person admin like, hey, guys, I didn't have control of that. But I made an effort, but unfortunately the pressures from the outside shifted the effort. But, you keep on doing that, then I stop trying. And then, admin doesn't care. No, hold on. I'm human too. I want to be appreciated. I want to have value. But if you're only going to judge me based on the outcomes I could produce that are out of my control, then I'm going to stop trying. Because at that point, it's not worth the effort. And think about it. And why not, if we could just be fair in our argument, how many times do you have officers or staff get mad because when they write a charge, the charge isn't supported, and they get mad and they say, well, you know, I'm going to stop holding inmates accountable. I'm just going to stop trying because it looks like my effort doesn't matter because I'm not getting the outcome I wanted. And again, I get it, but it's an outcome out of your control. Yet you're using that same mindset to push on management who doesn't have control of the outcome, makes the effort, and then you expect them to still, it's like, well, wait a second, it goes both ways. Admin's mad because, okay, I may not be able to produce the outcome, but I produced the effort, it didn't work, and at this point here, you know what, I'll keep trying, and then Joe comes up who's aggravated. It's like, you know what, this is bullshit, we should have got that outcome. It's like, you know what, guys, but I'm trying, it doesn't matter, do more, screw that, I'm done. It translates both ways because you know why? What's the common factor? Doesn't matter the position. We're all human. You know, all of us want to be appreciated for the efforts that we provide. So I think, Joe, would you agree that this is kind of shifting towards the blame game where a lot of people could be looking at efforts that are purely out of people's control, and a level of transparency may allow for us to see what's behind that curtain? I think that would be beneficial for management to allow that.
It is. And, you know, I see a couple of possible scenarios behind the asking of the question. You know, one scenario is that maybe, you know, one of his coworkers, his or her coworkers, maybe promoted and, you know, priorities have kind of shifted for that. And, you know, the officer didn't get the outcome that they were expecting because they were COs together or what have you. You know, the question probably could have been better phrased if they would have asked, you know, as you promote up the career ladder, do you lose your focus or care about the staff, you know, in order to meet the inmate needs? You know, that's probably a better phrasable question to get the same answer. And, you know, again, let me be clear, you know, correctional officers at the frontline level, you know, at that stage of your career, it's us versus them. It's us versus the inmates. Those are the only two options, us or them. As you promote up the ladder, you got to understand that as we promote, our priorities of them changes as well. Our priorities not only become them inmates, but it also becomes them staff. So we have to balance the welfare and the commitment to both angles. Now, do supervisors portray that physically every day? Probably not. And I've worked with a few that didn't, you know, but in the grand scheme of things, you know, when decisions were made, not everybody understood the reason why decisions were made, but they were made with the best interests of all in mind. You know, let's take the scenario that you gave, Anthony, about writing the charge and the supervisor coming back and dismissing the charge. You know, the charge might have been dismissed because the preamble or the paraphrase, you know, it was worded wrong and probably wouldn't have held through the disciplinary process, or it was missing an element of the charge in order to be able to carry out the charge. You know, but, you know, it also takes that supervisor to communicate with that officer about that, you know, hey, look, you know, this is good, but we need to add this in there if we want this to be a good, solid case to make it through the disciplinary process. You know, so, you know, there's a lot of communication involved regarding that, but, you know, to make a definitive line to say, you know, us or them, you know, especially at the supervisory, you know, I would probably say mid-level supervisory, you know, I'd say lieutenant and above, you know, our definition of them is pretty damn broad, because not only them staff, them offenders, them departments, you know, for us, them is a hell of a lot broader than them at the CO level, because at the CO level, it's us or them. You know, so we have to take into account that, you know, we are legally responsible for the offender population, for the health and welfare of the population. We are legally bound by law to ensure their health and welfare. Now, you know, if the correctional officers are giving them what they're supposed to have on a daily basis, not going above and beyond, just giving them their basic, what they're supposed to have. A lot of that could be alleviated. But again, we're legally responsible for these guys. So as you promote up in the supervisory chain, your definition of us versus them changes quite a bit, and we have to make decisions, that aren't always popular. We're never going to please everybody. And if you're a supervisor that thinks you're going to please everybody, you're probably going to die at an early age, because that shit is never going to happen. It's never going to happen. You're never going to please everybody. And as long as you have the conflict because you made a sound decision with the health and welfare of everybody involved in mind, at some point they'll understand that. But to just walk in and say, it's like your kids fighting amongst each other. Well, Daddy, you like her more than you like me. No, it's not about me liking her more than I like you. You were my firstborn. She was my lastborn. I love you both the same. And I'm going to make sure that you both have what you need in life. And it's basically the same principle, in the correctional industry. It's what makes us correctional professionals. That's what makes us professionals. That is what allows us to succeed, because we are professional enough to know that we got to look after the needs of both the staff and the offender population.
Yeah, and also it goes outside the specific needs of just that one department. Remember, we've had discussions before where it is the higher level team that you represent and not just the team you lead, which obviously as you start moving up, you have the house, you have the whole house, which includes everything from custody to rehabilitative functions to medical care. But also as you start moving up at the higher level, most of your dialogue is going to be with people from the outside. You're going to be talking to family. You're going to be talking to senators. You get the outside pressure. Now, what we tend to do is stay true to our core values. So I don't shift because I have external pressure pushing me to shift. But having said that, I have to be very careful in how I translate what those concerns may be or what my expectations are with staff. So having said that, most of the family will probably be arguing back to us that because I don't think the officers know this or staff know this, but we get yelled at from the outside saying that we care more about our staff than we do the inmates.
All the time.
So I don't think they realize that. So now you got this dialogue where you're in the sandwich in the middle. Staff say you care about inmates more. Families and outside think that you care about staff more. And then it's like, you know what? I'm in the middle. I could let the pressures get to me. But you know what? If I just do what is right, I don't care how people perceive it at this point. I don't. Because I can't please everyone. And I have to give people equal value that are making the phone call. So again, here I am in the middle trying to see, oh my God, what am I supposed to do to please the inmate's family? What am I supposed to do to please staff? It's like, you know what? Just do what's right. And I've always felt that staff is a priority because it will directly influence how the population is dealt with. But we have to remember something, guys. There is that effort to be productive towards the inmate population. So that is an end result. So if I'm making staff it's a priority, it's because, yes, they're a priority because these are things we have to accomplish. But that doesn't negate the human factor that, of course, I care for my staff. But sometimes, be honest with you, if I care without a filter of being productive, I could be manipulated by staff, just like I could be manipulated by inmates as well. I have to make sure that we're always in line with doing what is expected of us, which means holding people accountable on both sides. Because I could also see people not getting what they want and using, hey, you don't care about me as a way to try to get me to soften a perspective where it's like, no. So I think the best bet here is to provide a level of transparency so people could see the effort, but also let them see some of the phone calls we get. Let them see how we're being yelled at because the family thinks we care about staff more. And there's one other thing I want to add for this, because I think this was pretty much quick and to the point, Joe. But for management now, because you're not in the clear either, I want to add something in all fairness. There is a level of, as I said, priority towards staff. And you have to make sure you maintain those core values. You can't shift. And I want to mention something right now. If you make sure staff is involved. They feel engaged. They're going to feel care 100% because their voice is heard. I mean, goes beyond you just saying. I think the priority of it all is the actions that show them you care.
Absolutely.
So priority is the defined actions, right? But I will say this. Don't think the command structure of I'm just going to say this and they have to get done work. Because at the end of the day, you're only going to get staff to do the bare minimum. They'll do it, but they'll do the bare minimum. And I still believe that this profession needs more than that, because we need people who are willing to step up, pick up the ball when needed, and then pass it off when needed. But what's your thoughts on this, Joe?
Yeah, especially when it comes to, orders that are given down like that with no kind of justification. I wholeheartedly, absolutely agree, because 90% of the times you'll get more resistance than you will get acceptance. And that was kind of what I was leading to with my other scenario, possible scenario with this officer. It sounds like that maybe they did something that got overruled by a supervisor or something, maybe somebody above them. That's something that happens every day. I mean, I'd have to have 200 people lined up with their hands and feet out to count fingers and toes for every time that I made a decision that was either overruled by a captain, by a major, by an assistant warden, by a warden, and that's within their scope to do. Sometimes they came back and say, "Hey, Lieutenant, I know you did this, but this is the reason why I did this." And sometimes you don't get that. Don't get butt hurt over something that you don't know the full scope of. If you have a question, if you get overruled and you just have to have a definitive answer as to what's going on, go to that person, ask them. Don't be arrogant about it. Don't be belligerent about it. Be sincere about it. Say, hey, this is what I did, and I guess you felt something different. Is it something I did? Is there a reason why? Don't go in there being arrogant. Don't go in there being belligerent. I've done that. I've done that myself out of the heat of the moment, and it didn't end well for me. But you guys got to understand that in the mid-level management, and even frontline supervision, sometimes we are forced to make calls that aren't always popular. And it's just the nature of the beast. It is what it is. We have to do it. You're not going to make everybody happy, ever. So don't give yourself ulcers trying, because you're going to give yourself ulcers for no reason. And communication, two-way communication. And I beat this horse into the ground. Communication would absolve 90% of the butt hurt in our profession if people would just open their damn mouth.
Right.
Open your mouth. Give a short explanation. You don't have to be detailed. You don't have to get down to the bones and cartilage. Just give them a general, definitive justification as to why either this order is coming down from the administration, or this is the reason why I overruled your answer, even though I didn't do it on the pod or on the tank. Behind the scenes, this is the reason why I had to overrule this. It doesn't take but a 10-second conversation to alleviate years of butt hurt.
And you know what, Jug, I got to add to something you're saying. We did a show on this, guys. There's so much assumption going on about what specifically, let's say, admin says, or what specifically they mean by something. And it's funny because when you actually bring the staff to the office and you explain it, they'll be like, well, I didn't know that. I get it. But you judged us like you did. Yep. But again, that's when you got to have open transparency. I think transparency will help provide trust. Obviously, we know that, but it will help provide the answers that people are just assuming at this point.
Absolutely. And when when these wardens, and I'm sure you do it at your facility with your staff too, Anthony, is when you have these staff meetings with your supervision, your departments, 80% of these people aren't taking this information back to their staff.
Yeah.
So when the wardens are coming around, or the administrators are coming around asking questions about things, and the officers are looking at, or the staff are looking at them with the deer in the headlight look, like, what the hell are you talking about? And you're thinking, okay, well, I just discussed this in a staff meeting. That's why I think it's of the utmost importance for everybody who is involved in the staff meeting to take this information back and deliver it to their staff. Don't deliver it to your staff in a negative way. Take it back to your staff and say, hey guys, this is what's coming down. This is the reason for it. This is what we got to do to make it happen.
And Joe, we also discussed this too. I love what you're saying because that message has to be passed down, but I want to add something else to that too, to complement what you just said. As this is for management now, guys, when you have all those people at that table and you're discussing things and you know that things have to be brought down to the people on the front line, the knowledge workers, you better make sure that room understands in clarity what's expected, but also that they bought in. Have they been given a chance to speak their concerns, whatever? It's because you need buy-in at that table. Because I will tell you something right now. If you don't get buy-in when everybody leaves, that message, even if it gets translated with no effort of buy-in, no effort of care, and actually could go the adverse. It could go the adverse where, you know what, I can't believe they're making us do this. And now this person, because here's the funny thing, guys. The supervisors that have to translate that message to the front line, have to see those people every day. So you want to make sure that they buy into everything because you need them to sell it. You need them to sell it to the front line. So having said that, if you feel that they're not on board, you need to talk to them, bring them up. Hey, what's going on? I know you had a little concern. Maybe there's something that I didn't hear from you. Let me get your input. Because even if we don't agree, if we have trust, we can have conflict. We could work it out. But the big thing is if I can't get buy-in to that message at that table, when that goes down, the world of assumption run wild. It will be assumptions on the why it's being done because it wasn't translated properly, or the verbiage. Because, the verbiage, if you have a supervisor, and I will get on them real quick, if I pass a message and I ask for anybody's input and they don't provide input, and then it goes down to the front line has all these concerns and admin doesn't care, you go right back to those supervisors. Hey, come here. I had a meeting with you guys. I asked you guys what your thoughts were. Nobody wanted to volunteer their thoughts. So I thought we were all on the same page. We're all good. Everybody left, they were on the same page. So why is it now that when we are going to implement this, all these concerns are coming up? But more importantly, because I expect concerns to come up as things move, but more importantly, admin doesn't care. You were given an opportunity. You did not speak well for the people there. You said there were no concerns, and now we're coming back. Because even me, I know when you're implementing something in a world like corrections, concerns can happen. You're never going to have a perfect plan. I get it. But what I don't like is when people start saying admin doesn't care. Because the meetings, when you have these really good meetings with the higher ups and everybody's involved, you want that energy to translate back down to the front line so they can feel that their voices were heard, so they also can feel committed. But if you got supervisors that are not bringing it up and management asks openly, hey, we have anything going on? And they say, no, we're good. I'm sorry, man. And don't get me wrong. I do meet my front line as well. But having said that, there's a lot more of them. Sometimes I need to see the supervisors and trust that the supervisors can speak for their front line.
Yeah.
So excuse me, but I do feel sometimes when you give people the opportunity to speak and they choose not to, but then they go back down and want to be the hero.
Yeah.
They go back down and want to be the hero, and it's like, wait a second, but we asked you multiple. You said you were good. But now you're saying we don't care. But did you forget that you were asked multiple times if this would work? So sometimes these assumptions would just work out better if we, instead of having assumptions, we just had the courage to speak to each other. If I had a question, instead of me assuming with the answers, I may even say, hey, Joe, Administrator Joe, hey, I'm not trying to circumvent command, but you think I can have an appointment with you to maybe see you next week to discuss some of the stuff we got going on? And good leadership will say, hey, you're not circumventing command. You just ask some questions for clarity. Sure. Let's see when we can figure this out. Just because, and sometimes I do that just to make sure the why of what's being done is being translated. And, even if it was a plan that maybe wasn't the best, the efforts I tried, and not to point blame, just these are the efforts I tried. It didn't work, but let me tell you why it still has to be done. So sometimes it's not that bad. And sometimes you get supervisors that would say, well, they're circumventing the chain of command. Well, no, because you didn't translate good enough why we were doing these things. And actually, now the front line's all mad at me. Well, how did that happen? What was it passed? Like, where was there? Did you pass the effort that we made not to do it this way? I just think there's a lot of things ran by assumption that it's just quick for people to get caught into that and just do the blame game instead of really just manning up, stopping by the office and saying, hey, Gange, I know you mentioned this idea and I don't want to go around anybody's back. Well, come in. What's going on? Well, blah, blah. It's like, oh, well, this is why it has to be done. Oh, Gange, no one ever told me that. And boom, they're gone. And you want to hear something funny? When you have that dialogue, it's crazy how that frontline officer or frontline staff member who had the courage to, you know what, this doesn't sound like Gange, or this doesn't sound like the admin I'm used to. I'm going to go ahead and maybe ask why we're doing this. Fine, not a problem. I'm comfortable in my position. I don't take a why we're doing something as a challenge to it. Come up, we have the dialogue. Now he goes back. That person defends the stuff we're doing and the morale increases.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was just fixing to say. How many times have you had a bad communicator, deliver your information the wrong way, and a CO would come to the major and say, hey, what the hell's going on with this? And, the major's like, nah, that's not what I said. What I said was this. And the officer's like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. And then that officer goes back and says, that lieutenant doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. He's talking out of his ass. This is what the major actually said. This is what was supposed to be in play. And then everybody's like, oh, okay, well, okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's why
I call those.
To have somebody who's a good communicator. You have to have somebody who is a good communicator. Period.
Joe, we call those supervisors on the table. If I feel that there's a message that's being spread to the front line that doesn't get me the buy-in I need or whatever, or it's just unfair in how it's presented, I don't want to let that spread like a cancer. I want people to know this is why we're doing it. And I'm telling you something, 9 times out of 10, if you take the time to explain the why, people understand it. But sometimes they don't see the scoreboard. They're just players in a game. They don't know if we're ahead or behind because no one shows them the scoreboard. So I'm like, come in. This is the score. This is where we're at. Oh, shit. I didn't even know we were playing a game. It's like, no, guys, this is where we're at. This is the scoreboard. So this is why the adjustments had to be made. I get it. When you don't know the scoreboard, you don't know if you're winning or losing. All right, the adjustments. I don't know if I need these adjustments. And then when you tell people, hey, guys, this is where we're at, you show them the bigger picture. It just opens up a whole world of a better relationship with the individuals. That's why I'm very key right now on transparency. And I'm going to express it one more time because right now we are going through a change in corrections. We know that. But having said that, we do need more management that is stepping up and letting staff know that they're a priority. And I could say they care, but I'm not going to say that care more for one over the other. I'm just going to say, of course, they care for their staff 100% because they know if I want my staff to be effective, I have to show them I care. How do I show them I care? By actions, not words, by actions, by being a resource for them. And the funny thing is, the staff that are productive, the things that they want handled are things that are going to help them do their job. So it all equates. It all pans out in this perfect world. But with that said, at the end of the day, when you have leaders that showcase they care or they showcase that their staff is a priority, I don't think this question of who's more important, one or the other. I think everybody sees that it's all related. It's all related, because at the end of the day, I'm not doing the sake of it just to be Mr. Popular. I'm doing it because staff has to be effective. So staff will come up and say, Gange, I want to do this, but if I do this, this is how it affects the population. Okay, let's switch it up. Now staff goes, oh, Gange really helped me out. But when you look at it, Gange helped him out so he could be better or she could be better or more effective at dealing with the job they have to do every day, which is the management of the inmate population. Hey, Joe, you have anything you'd like to say in closing, sir?
Yeah, communicate with your folks both ways, from frontline up, from supervision down. Don't ever, if you feel like that your supervision generally cares more about the offender population than they do the staff, you need to sit down and have a discussion with them, because I think you're going to find out that that's not the case. Initial assumptions are always that case because we're supervisors. Like I said, our definition of us versus them is a hell of a lot broader than the frontline level of us versus them. So, if you truly have felt that your supervision and command staff care more about the offender population, I'm sorry, it shouldn't be that way. And a lot of good communication can clear a lot of that up. And I implore you to communicate with them, with the staff, communicate with your supervision, communicate with your administration. Because I'm almost 95% positive that the question that was asked was probably based on emotion. And if you were to actually communicate with that person or those involved, I think you would find out that it's unjust. So, make sure that you maintain your integrity regardless. Always doing the right thing even when nobody's looking. It's something that we can all do in order to alleviate a lot of this. Our job functions, and the things that we do. That's why we're considered correctional professionals, because we're able to work with the offender population. We're able to work with our coworkers. We're able to maintain operations within a facility every day without major disruptions. And the supervision can't do it without the COs. The COs can do it without the supervision all day long, but without y'all, there's no us. So I want you guys to understand that off the bat. But y'all be safe and take care of each other.
Yeah, guys. In my close, I want to mention something. Immediate results. I get it. Sometimes we want immediate results, but management has to think more long term. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean we negate what needs to be done immediately to keep you being effective. But sometimes the results that you may want are not the results that technically keep us surviving in the long term. I mean, you can have somebody that can defend you guys and scream and stand on the pedestal like they're Braveheart, but are they convincing the side anything else, or they're just showboating? And at the end of the day, that was great what he said for 3 hours, but we're going to go back to these levels of operations. So, hey, you said what you had to say, and, you got the room, but then when you go back to work, things are always how they've been and always will continue that route. I think the big thing isn't about the showboating and screaming at the top of your lungs and, pointing out what everybody's doing wrong and how you're right. Because at the end of the day, most of the people that speak on this, sometimes I'm like, are you trying to solve an issue, or are you just trying to prove a right or wrong thing? Because the problem is, if you make no effort to work together, the people that are on the other side, they don't want to hear your perspective. Because at the end of the day is, the way you're doing it right now is, if you're right, then I'm wrong. So I'm gonna defend my side, even at the most elementary of levels, because I'm not willing to admit that I'm wrong. But if you go in and you kind of just say, hey, this is where we're at, this is where where we got to be. How do we get there together? These are my concerns. What are your concerns? Is it a soft approach? It's the only approach, because I have seen that approach produce results. I have. So don't get me wrong. There are times where you have to grandstand. I get it, because things have to be done immediately. I get it. But when you're looking at the long term, when you're looking at things to keep things consistent in the long run, you have to develop working relationships. You have to. I think Lincoln said it best: a house divided on itself cannot stand. And I remember there was a lady during the Civil War. She was mad because he was trying to work with the South. And basically she goes, it looks like you're trying to make them your friends. And he goes, well, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically, when I make an enemy into a friend, I lose an enemy. The big thing here is he knew that he would have to go back and put this country together. That was the key. So basically, he didn't want to be divisive, because he knew in the end, when the war was won, it was never really won because people didn't buy in, especially on the South. So he had to do what he can to try to build relationships during the battle. And I guess I'm kind of translating that here. We're in a battle. We know we're in a battle. But are we doing anything to maintain relationships so if we ever win the battle, everybody has buy-in to where we need to go in the future? Because that's the biggest concern I have, is questions like that become very divided. very divisive. And the end of the day is if we ever start heading into the right direction, we're going to just have resistance because there are people that just never bought in why we're going through it. So I think we should really start making attempts to see both sides. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.